Welcome to the Deep Dive. We're your shortcut through all the noise, getting you straight to the insights that matter. Ever wonder about the real cost of global trade policies day to day, or how just one political move can ripple across continents? Today, we're doing a deep dive into something pretty significant: the impact of former President Donald Trump's trade policies. We've gathered a lot of compelling source material, and our mission, really, is to pull out those key pieces of knowledge. We want to show how these policies reshaped global trade and, importantly, how they affected consumers, like you.
It's definitely a big topic, and the material we have really details some major economic fallout, significant shifts in how countries trade with each other. This deep dive isn't just about listing events, it's about understanding why it all matters, and maybe what it signals for global business down the road. We want to make sure you get a solid grasp without getting lost in the weeds.
Okay, let's unpack this then. To really get it, we probably need to start at the beginning. What was the initial strategy behind these tariffs in the first place?
Right. So our sources point to the administration kicking things off with what they called Section 232 tariffs. This was mainly on imported steel and aluminum. Basically, it meant putting taxes on these imports. The justification used was national security. And the goal seemed pretty straightforward: make foreign steel, say, 25% more expensive. The idea was that U.S. producers could then compete better, grab more market share, and hopefully revitalize American industry.
Right. Okay, so levy the tax, boost the home team. What was the immediate reaction? You'd kind of expect American manufacturers to get a lift from that, wouldn't you?
Well, that's where it gets interesting. What the sources really highlight is a classic case of, let's call it, economic aftershock or unintended consequences. Instead of just a simple boost, economists started calculating the actual cost. The findings suggest these tariffs acted almost like a hidden tax on American consumers. By 2019, the estimate was around $800 per household annually. This wasn't just the tariffs themselves, but also the retaliation.
Right, Allie?
Exactly. Other countries didn't just sit back, they imposed their own tariffs on U.S. exports. So you had rising import costs and U.S. goods becoming more expensive overseas, and that meant prices started climbing on all sorts of things here at home, from everyday consumer items to industrial materials. Americans really began to feel the squeeze.
Hold on. So the goal was helping U.S. jobs, but the sources actually show these policies ended up hiking prices on everything from, groceries to car parts. For American families, that's quite a twist.
It is, and it really underscores just how, interconnected everything is in the global economy. A pull here causes a push way over there.
Okay. And then things took another turn, right? Something really interesting happened with Canada, one of our closest allies, a massive trading partner. They decided to pull out of certain agreements. What did the sources say about why they did that?
Canada's reasoning, based on our sources, was pretty direct. They stated quite clearly that their decision was a direct result of these U.S. trade policies. This wasn't just like a minor disagreement. The reports suggest this sent actual shockwaves through North American trade. It marked a really significant shift. Think about it. This was a partnership that had been solid for decades. Canada was essentially drawing a line saying, look, we can't accept policies that hurt our economy, even from you.
And Trump's reaction, prices are going up. Canada makes this big move. How did he respond? We know he was usually swift and vocal.
He was. He defended the tariffs strongly, insisted they were vital for protecting U.S. manufacturing jobs, and he talked a lot about forcing other countries to, quote, level the playing field.
Level the playing field. What did that mean in practical economic terms? What was the argument there?
The argument was that these tariffs were leverage, a tool to push back against what he saw as unfair practices by other nations, things like currency manipulation or state subsidies that gave foreign industries an edge over American ones. As for the rising prices here at home, he generally framed that as a temporary issue, a sort of necessary short-term pain for long-term gain.
Okay, temporary. But did the sources offer pushback on that idea? Yeah. Were there specific groups maybe feeling this pain more than others, beyond just the average household figure?
Oh, absolutely. Critics jumped on that right away, arguing the consequences were likely far from temporary. Economists warned that these higher prices would keep squeezing American consumers, especially with inflation already being a concern for many. And yes, the sources did highlight that lower-income households were hit disproportionately hard. They spend a bigger chunk of their income on basic goods, right? So those price increases on food, electronics, everyday stuff, it hurt them more. The general expectation among critics was that these costs would just keep climbing, potentially undermining the very goal of helping everyday Americans, even if it boosted some manufacturing areas.
And circling back to that fallout, you mentioned Canada's exit.
Hmm.
Our sources seem to frame that as maybe the most significant consequence, at least up to that point. I mean, the U.S. Canada economic ties are incredibly deep, right? Automotive, energy, agriculture.
Yeah.
So, how did Canada pulling back actually hit those specific sectors? What did the research show?
Well, the impact was pretty direct, especially when you combine the exit from certain agreements with those steel and aluminum tariffs already in place. Think about the complex supply chains, especially the just-in-time ones. They got disrupted almost immediately. The auto sector is a prime example. It relies so much on parts moving seamlessly across the border. Suddenly, Canadian-made components faced new duties. So manufacturers had tough choices. Absorb the costs, which hurts profits, raise car prices for consumers, or try to quickly find new domestic suppliers, which is really hard and expensive to do, especially in such a globalized industry. There was even an anecdote in one source about a small appliance maker in Ohio. The tariffs were meant to help businesses like theirs, but their costs for imported steel parts went up, forcing them to actually consider layoffs. It really shows how complex these effects can be.
Wow, yeah, that example really makes it concrete. Okay, so let's zoom out a bit. Beyond North America, you mentioned the global trade shifts. How did other big players react? Think the EU, China. Did they also start changing how they trade or where they get their supplies because of all this and because of Canada's move?
Yeah, this is where you see the ripples spreading wider, connecting to that bigger picture. Our sources suggest that countries that had long viewed the U.S. as a, reliable cornerstone trading partner started to seriously reconsider. They began actively looking elsewhere for deals, diversifying their options. It wasn't just about the immediate tariffs anymore. There's evidence, for instance, that some nations, maybe like Germany or Japan, started speeding up plans to diversify their supply chains, trying to rely less on both the U.S. and China. This could foster whole new trading blocs over time. And you saw direct responses, too. The EU hit back with retaliatory tariffs on very iconic American products, Harley-Davidson's, bourbon whiskey. China targeted U.S. agricultural goods heavily. So yes, this could potentially lead to a fundamental shift in the global balance of trade power, especially in sectors where the U.S. has traditionally been very strong manufacturing, energy, agriculture. So while the stated aim was bringing jobs back home, the sources suggest the longer-term effect might actually be reduced overall trade for the U.S. and maybe more economic instability in this increasingly interconnected world we live in.
So, wrapping this up, where does this leave us now? We've walked through this unfolding economic drama. It seems pretty clear the consequences of these tariff policies were and are pretty far-reaching. The higher prices consumers felt, Canada making that unprecedented move. And it really does feel like, according to the sources, that might just have been the beginning, other countries strategically adjusting.
Exactly. And that really brings us to the crucial question that emerges from all this material we've looked at. Something for you, the listener, to really mull over. Will these kinds of aggressive trade policies ultimately achieve the goal of strengthening American manufacturing in the long run? Or will the cost, the sustained economic pressure on U.S. consumers, the potential for a broader, maybe even permanent reshuffling of global trade networks outweigh the benefits? What seems undeniable, based on everything we've discussed, is that America's role and position within the global trade landscape is, right now, being actively redefined. It's a pivotal story and definitely one to keep watching.
Yes, thanks for watching. Stay updated with Global Scope 360. Thank you so much. Subscribe to my channel and click the bell icon.